I am alive. I can hear you. Windows 10 sucks. Yeah. That's true. Small mercies. Incrementally less crap. My laptop still has Windows 7 on it. Yeah. Nothing like turning it off and back on again. Yeah. I swear that's what half of the tech support offices do. Yes, so good. Okay, we're gonna put the entire Google is God / Microsoft Windows 10 is garbage on hold for a second. And like I was saying before I cut out, I'm going to quickly go through unwrapping the box and barrel, showing you guys some new tools, some new techniques, and then I'm going to start the homework with you. On the plus side, because Section 2 has a 6-hour block with their texturing class, we're actually still right on schedule to hit the same content. So both of these have been reset, or rather it's the original file. So right to start unwrapping, add on the unwrap UVW modifier. Yep. For this, you guys, you can just watch. I'm going to do it at not my full speed, but a faster speed than I did when I was introducing it to you guys. And then when I go to the new stuff, I'll slow down. Keep up. Sure. So if you're, sorry, I'm just going to quickly address that. I don't mean to step on you. But if you go to the VGD Home Twitch channel, or sorry, the Model Texture Home Twitch channel, and then you go to the Videos tab, it saves all the previous lessons for 2 weeks. So, yeah. You can always refer back to everything. And then people start clipping out specific portions of the broadcast that they might have trouble with later on, or that they want to refer back to, rather than just recording timestamps. That's doable as well. Part of the reason why I love using Twitch. It's a little more versatile than Zoom. And higher quality. Alright, so anytime you're starting with an unwrap, most of the time, if possible, relay it down to one of the simple primitives: plane, cylinder, sphere, box. Most of the time you're going to be using either cylinder or planar projection map. In the case of the barrel, rather, it's definitely a cylinder. So once UV unwrap is added, go poly mode, Control A to select everything, and hit it with the cylindrical projection. Oh, sorry. I forgot to restart the screen share. There you go. Unwrap it, or for the Normandy to unwrap and texture, saying I was stuck, or saying I was using Photoshop only. Yep, about 4 hours, maybe. I've never actually timed myself on that. Although, that being said, nice little segue. Because most, or a number of the classes have 15-minute sort of blank areas while you guys are getting food. So your Tuesday stream, I'll start doing it. Wednesday and yesterday's streams, or sorry, Thursday streams. That first 15 minutes, rather than just having it as blank air, while I'm waiting for you guys to get food. So this is yesterday's class. Oh, no worries. I actually go through and I speed model something in 15 minutes, unwrap something and texturing it in 15 minutes. So it's not stuff... Not very. So this model, for example, it's still pretty dirt simple, but I added in some light and whatnot. That's 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. Yep. Actually, nice little segue. If you do have accommodations, and if you guys don't know what that is, don't worry about it. You do have to let me know ahead of time that you want to make use of it. So, leading up to the midterm, I'll make mention of it in stream beforehand. So I've hit it with a cylindrical projection fit center just to get the gizmo back to the shape of the geometry that I'm unwrapping. Actually, I'll just redo that. So fit center. The way that cylindrical projection works is that in order to get the spherical or cylindrical object into a flat plane, at least one edge needs to be broken somewhere. So where that edge happens to be, we'll talk about it in later classes, but for now, at least one needs to be broken so that it can be unfolded one way or the other. As it does that break, sometimes it's not completely aligned with where it should be, and you get these polygons that just fly off the side. So if I look on the left, it looks like I have some edges missing. If I look on the right, there's some polygons sticking out. While the gizmo is active, any kind of move, rotate, scale is being applied to the gizmo only. So if I just rotate it just a slight bit to give it a little bit of a nudge, you'll see those polygons pop over and reattach themselves. So basically what it's doing as you rotate is it takes all these polygons, breaks them off, brings them to the other side, and reattaches them. So nothing that you couldn't do manually, but obviously this is much faster. So bang, 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 rotate. As you're unwrapping, open the UV editor down here. So your primary goal whenever you're unwrapping something is once you apply a checker pattern to it, to get nice perfect squares. I still have the gizmo active, so if I start scaling the gizmo up, I'm starting to get nice squares along the sides of the barrel. You can't really tell if all the distortion is gone unless you have, typically I use at least three squares of the checker pattern per polygon. So right now with default settings, I'm a little low. I can only see, barely one square here. So just to the left of that texture drop down where I assigned the checker pattern, going to the options dialog box and going down to miscellaneous preferences, checker tiling, and then dialing that up. This number is completely arbitrary. It's not a value that's going to affect your texture or how it appears. It's just looking at your 3D space and then increasing how many times it shows that black and white checker pattern. So the higher that number is, the more dense your checker pattern is going to be. The lower that number is, the more sparse that checker pattern is going to be. So now I've got, about 10 tiles of the checker on each polygon. So I can tell that, yep, it's pretty clean. Bottom and top are still messes. And because I've dialed the checker pattern up, I can also tell that I have quite a bit of distortion along the sides of the top of the rim. So if I were to apply a texture to that, it's going to look like it was all hit with the smudge brush from inside of Photoshop. So I'd lose quite a bit of texture fidelity in those areas. But the sides of the barrel are good. And this is pretty much all I can do with the cylindrical unwrap, so I'm going to turn it off. go into my UV editor, and I can start moving my shells around. Because of that cylindrical projection, in order to cut one edge vertically, for whatever reason, Max ends up splitting some of the horizontal edges as well. So, turn this off. You can see that I have green border edges going up the side, which by themselves aren't going to be a huge issue, but it's still best practice to go back and just stitch them back together. So right now I'm looking at the side of the barrel, and I've got green border edge right here, which realistically should be a white interior. So I'm just going to select it from the UV editor. I'm not going to marquee select it, because if I try to marquee and then stitch selected, it's going to detect that it has matching vertices or a sister vertice on the other side, and they're going to merge together in the middle. Definitely not what I want. So I'm just going to single click, right click to open up the quad menu, and then go down to stitch selected to set it to a white interior edge. Rather than right click and going down to stitch selected every single time, as soon as I right click, the mouse cursor will come in over top of these blue squares. Each of those squares corresponds to the upper left, the upper right, lower left quad menu. So these lists of commands. So if I want to repeat the last command that I used from the lower left, rather than traveling over here and clicking on it, I can just click on the lower left blue square to repeat the same command. And now I've got interior edges all along the side. I'm going to do the same thing with the barrel straps. So right click. Stitch, stitch, stitch. I don't know why that one's freaking out. If I were to select these polygons that are smeared, or in the case of the bottom, well, it was previously just blank. So if I want to see what their position is in 2D UV space, I'm going to just turn off my ignore backfacing so that I can select both sides of the mesh at the same time. Because otherwise, ignore backfacing is turned on and the mesh is pointed away from me. No amount of marking or selecting will allow me to select the vertice on top. So backfacing off, grab them both, and then I'll hold down Control, click Polygon, and that will convert from a vertice selection over to all of the polygons that touch that vertice. So if you need to select a large area quickly, you just select some of the vertices, convert selection to poly, then you're good. So the reason why these guys look so terrible is because if I look in 2D space, all I will see rather are completely straight red lines. That means that all the edges are stacked on top of one another. It means they'll get the exact same texture and it's going to look god awful. That being said, they are pretty much completely flat. So they're basically just planes. Planar projection. Find a value or an axis that makes it look correct. So if I had started like this, obviously that's not working. And I can see here that there's still straight lines. So underneath the align options, so this is referring to aligning or rotating the projection map. X, garbage. Y, garbage. Z, bingo. So now I can actually see the top, and this so happens to be the bottom of the barrel at the same time. So they've been stacked on top of one another perfectly already, which is another plus. The only thing I want to be careful of is if I were to apply a texture to this right now, the top of the barrel would look really clean, clear, and crisp. But because it's right next to the sides of the barrel, obviously because it's one continuous mesh, these polygons will look nice, clean, and crisp. These less so. So there's going to be a marked texture quality difference between the top and sides of the barrel. So whenever you're unwrapping, you want to do your best to try and keep the size of your checker pattern across the entire surface as consistent as possible. So looking at the size of my squares here, pretty close. Now, with your assignments, I'm not going to go through with calipers and say, oh, you're 5 millimeters off. As long as it's reasonably close, just from a visual appearance, that's what I'm looking for. I'll get more particular with it once you guys have some more experience with it. So, top, bottom is done, sides are done. The only thing I need to take care of now is this smearing or distortion on the tops of the rings. And this is where the new tool comes in. So I know that the size of the rims are good. I can actually see that they're nice, perfect squares going all the way around. It's just this stuff that's messed up. So there's a tool inside of 3CO Max's Unwrap suite, or Unwrap tools rather, that will allow you to say, essentially telling Max, these polygons are all fine. These ones are not. I want you to try and get these guys to match these. So I need to select the polygons that are doing well. So I'll select this guy. Right, can't use that command. 1 second. So selecting all of the middle all the middle polygons. I'm going, in order to tell Max that these are perfect, I'm going to convert my selection from polygons back to vertices. So control click vert. And from underneath the peel command, I'm going to take off detach and avoid overlap. I'll come back to those in a second. I'm going to tell it pin selected. Whenever you pin select it, it's telling Max these vertices are where they should be. Don't move them. So that now when I go back to those the entire shelf, so I've double clicked on the top rim, and then I hit quick peel. That's not right. Why is it freaking out? Oh, give me 1 second. Sorry, I was fiddling with this earlier. Nope, should be fine. I don't know why it's freaking out. Interesting. Max just wants to give me a hard time, it looks like. Why Max? Why? Alright. I don't know what Max is doing, so I'll just reset it. back to the start. Grabbing those center vertices, or center polygons rather. Click, 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 click. Holding down, once I have a selection started, like in Photoshop when you want to add to a marquee, hold Control and then keep drawing or clicking. So pinned, there we go. I don't know why it was freaking out. So when I hit quick peel, it's going to, again, basically understand that the vertices I have pinned are where they should be, and I'll start moving everything else to match it. So it's not going to be a huge difference unless I really dial up my checker. It's this icon right here. So from smears to squares. Now there is a little bit of distortion on it. You can see that they're a little shaky, a little jagged. And I'll show you why. So you may be wondering, so what is Quick Peel actually doing? Quick Peel is looking at the distance or the length of your edges in 3D space and then trying to translate them directly into 2D. So based on that, so it's basically trying to get a good unwrap for you. Anytime you add in some kind of automation, you're basically losing control of what the result will be. If I were to do the same thing with the side of the barrel, so I hit Quick Peel, there isn't a huge change. So you can see that the squares are shifting a little bit. That's because, number one, this isn't a very complex object. The result that it gives you is correct or is accurate, but it's actually going to cause more problems than it solves. If the entire purpose of matching your edge length in 3D to your edge length in 2D, that means that these edges I currently have selected, since they are the largest circumference of the barrel, these should be the longest edges. So the result that Peel gives you is technically accurate, but then if I were to add a texture to this, it's actually going to give me more problems than it's worth. So if I turn off all my seams, you can see that the board, or the crease between the boards, the separation between the boards, disappears, or it exists in the middle of the boards, and as you get away from it, vanishes. Whereas before I had the Peel command on. Come on. Yep. Because those border edges are completely straight, I can move this around, see it right in the middle. And you can't tell that there's a border there. So there are going to be a lot of times where the mathematical result or the precise result is actually going to make it harder for you to work with. And I'll be showing different instances of where that's the case as we go through the course. So a lot of it comes down to, a lot of the best practices come down to just experience with unwrapping. Now I've got someone asking, I feel like I missed the pin part. Yep. Actually, I'm going to do the same, or I'm going to use pin on the cube as well. So because I didn't stitch those edges before I started doing all this, the size of my barrel have been exploded, or sorry, the size of the rims have been exploded. So I just go through stitch, 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 and then just move them by hand. Because I already have some polygons or some vertices that are perfect, I have a pretty good idea of where they should be. So as many tools as there are for automated unwrapping, you're never going to get away from doing hand adjustments sooner or later. It's just an inevitability. And I'll show you guys what quick key I just used in a second. No worries. No worries. So basically the reason why you're pinning vertices is because they're in a good position or they have a correct unwrap. So just to do a bit of an exaggerated version of this, let's mess this up. So, for example, right now, these polygons are showing perfect squares. These ones, obviously not so much. I'm basically telling Max, this is the correct solution that I want to work with. I convert the vertices, pin in place or pin selected, and then I select the entire shell and peel it. So before peel, after. In the UV editor, yep, look for the 3 spheres with like a piece coming off of them, and the pin commands are just below it. But you have to be in vertice mode for them to be active. So I'm going to use that same idea with the crate or cube. So add unwrap UVW. It's a mess. So I'm going to select the top and bottom. Basically the same idea of what I did with the crate, or sorry, with the barrel's top and bottom. So I want to select all the polygons across the top, all of the polygons across the bottom. Once I have the center polygon selected, I'll just hit grow twice. Planar projection on Z. Select front, back, grow twice, planar projection, find the axis that works, which is the axis of Y. Left, right, grow, planar projection. Y doesn't work, Z doesn't work, X, bingo. And that's going to give me, for the most part, good UVs. If I look out in the interior, go ahead. Correct. Yep. With the size of the barrel, because you need that border edge to stay completely straight in order to hide the seam on the texture. So you can see the seam in green right now. That's only because it's been curved. As soon as that edge gets straightened, so again, I'm going to use a command that I'll explain in a second. So I've made it completely straight, and you can actually see it pop in from bad to better. Now it's not completely lining up because I don't have it perfectly positioned. With the side of the barrel, the result that it gives you from the cylindrical unwrap is actually the perfect solution. It's going to do it for you. All you need to do is scale the cylinder up so that you're left with not rectangles, but squares. And that's it. You don't have to use peel at all. Yep. Oh, these guys? Oh. Grab the flat area on the rim. So these are the areas where you do actually have perfect squares. Grab them. Convert selection to vertice. So now all the vertices that made up those polygons are part of your selection. Pin them. So the first pinning option underneath peel. And then select the entire shell and hit peel. Yep. So what's going to happen? I was going to get this layer, but since you asked the question, if you have detach on, so say for whatever reason I'm trying to fix this area only, so I'll play with this so that it's distorted. If I were trying to fix this area only, if I have detach turned on, it's going to automatically break that shell off. So if I go break right now and move it, it's now its own piece of shell. If I hit quick peel with detach turned on, basically does the same thing. It's just rather than break peel, it's going to do both at the same time. It's handy if you have, say, like someone posted a picture of a pistol that they're modeling. If you had like the magazine release, which is a little cylindrical area on the front part of the grip, typically you would want that as its own separate shell. So you just select the polygons that make up the magazine release, turn detach on, and then hit peel to get started with the unwrap. So that it actually breaks the magazine release out as its own separate UV shell. Avoid overlap, I seldom if ever use. I don't even really know why it's an option, considering what we'll get to later on, but it is. So detach will detach your selection from the rest of the shell. Avoid overlap will run the peel command, but then it will move the shell that you have selected to fill 1 UV space. Again, not quite sure why it does that, considering there's better tools for it, but it does. So typically I'm working with both of these off. If I do need to really detach something usually I'll just actually detach it myself so that I know where it should be or where I want it to be, and then peel it. Yep. Like this one. Yep. You probably have the same situation I did earlier where I accidentally stitched too many edges together. So before I reset the peel on this, or reset the unwrap, I had stitched too much together. I don't think I can get it to have a mistake now, but let's find out. Yep, there it is. So then when I tried doing peel, something like this happened. The reason for it is because, yeah, it's because this last border edge at the bottom, that is actually a border edge. There's no geometry off of it. Let's see if we can find it. There isn't actually a polygon here, on my version rather, because I said that I messed around with this a little bit, just so I could do this lesson a little quicker. And that's what's causing it. It's that extra polygon piece. Don't worry, all this will make sense once we start applying it to an object that you guys need to texture on your own. So I've got my checker pattern. Again, I don't have at least three squares going over these little guys in the middle. So I can't really tell if there's distortion there or not. I mean, if you're practiced enough, yeah, you can tell. So I just don't have enough tiling. Go up to the options, checker tiling. I'll pop it up to just go overboard and go 8. Now that I have multiple copies or multiple instances of the checker pattern, I can tell that these are actually pretty distorted. That's definitely a far cry away from being perfect squares. So what I'm going to do is, I've got perfect squares here, 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 and here. I'm going to tell Max, these guys are currently good. I like where they are. I like that they have no distortion. Don't move them. So control click vertice, pin in place, and then peel. So I go from really stretched rectangles. I do have something that's closer to squares, but they're still a little skewed. There's a little slant to them. They're not up, down, left, right, completely horizontal, vertical. The reason is the same reason, or the reason for that is the same reason that when we did the cylindrical unwrap for the barrel, we ended up with a really good result that we can work with. But when we hit quick peel on it, it's more accurate, but it's going to be a pain in the neck to work with. Because that quick peel is trying to make these two center edges longer. That's basically what's happening here. It's trying to make this edge longer than this edge, but because they're currently attached, it can't do anything. So I'm going to do it manually, where I grab this vertice and start adjusting it. So, hey, squares. Go to the other side. So I'm grabbing this vertice. Start moving it. Squares. So now these two guys are good. But now I've made this one worse. And I've made this one worse. And I've made this one worse. So I need to be able to adjust this polygon without affecting these guys. The only way I can do that is to separate them. So grabbing those 45-degree angles or 45-degree angle edges, break them, and now peel. Perfect. Perfect, 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 perfect. So there does come a time when you're trying to unwrap something, and in the process of trying to remove distortion from one area, you just end up injecting it into another. So you're not getting rid of distortion, you're just changing where the distortion is. In those situations, that's where you need to do cuts, or breaks rather. Sorry, I'll keep saying cuts because it's the Maya term. I just can't deprogram myself from it. So anytime that you're seeing hard corners, so I've got a hard, what would that be? 110, 120 degree angle between here and here. That's usually a good place to do a cut. Because I ran that planar projection to start, or that series of planar projections, between these two polygons is a hard 90. That gets a cut, or it's automatically been broken rather because of planar projection. So I need to do that with all the sides of the box. So I'm just double clicking all those 45-degree edges. They're all selected. I'm breaking them all at the same time. The center of all these sides is perfect rather. So I want to pin them in place. So control click the vertice, pin. And now I want everything to peel. Control A, peel. So looking at all my sides, perfect, 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 perfect. Squares all around. Now, initially it looks good. All my sides are looking good, etc., etc. But watch your 2D, your 2D view. It may look good in viewport, but when I look at my actual shells, anytime you have a UV island or a UV shell, so one continuous piece of mesh in UV space, you want them to be bordered by green or trimmed in green. So that's the case with these guys. You can see green edges going all the way around them. Here though, you have green border edges right in the middle of the shell. And that's going to cause some issues. The reason that it's doing this is just like how mesh has an inside versus an outside. So if I put on the normals here, flip. So this barrel's inside out. UVs are the same way. There's a front side or a flip side to UVs. The easiest way to tell is going select and select inverted polys. Or you can just tell. Like you have flip UVs or UV borders on the inside, it probably means they're flipped. Fixing it is just is as easy as grabbing them. Just like in 3D, there's a mirror command. Don't try to use this one instead of this one. UV editor has its own commands for a number of things. So if you're trying to adjust UVs, make sure your commands are coming from either the Unwrap UVW rollout or the UV editor window. So mirror, peel, perfect. That's it. Yep. So what's happening is the model is trying to flip itself inside out or flip itself around, but because vertices are pinned in place, the sides are moving in, but they can only move a certain distance because, again, it's trying to match your edge length. So you just select the shells that are inverted, go up to the mirror tool, or mirror command rather, and I just mirrored it twice. Mirror, peel, good to go. So I'll just move them so that they're stacked, which I'll show you how to do that in a second as well. So now when I add that texture to them, you're good to go. Only downside to stacking things like this is obviously it's going to be the exact same texture on all sides. So there's that dark knot. There it is again. There it is again. There it is again. But we'll deal with that sort of thing when we get to tilables. So a lot of theory loaded at the front, just so that you guys, when I start using pin and peel commands with your homework, it's not the first time that you're seeing it. And like I said, I'll go at a more moderated speed. So inside of texture 1, or the FOL homepage rather, I'm just going to close this out. Go over to content, and homework 1 is going to be visible to you. I actually made it visible at the start of class. There's an A-Wing model.max file in there. Give that a download and pop into max. Yep, I'll show you why in a second. So I'm just going to quickly go over the PDF with you, and then we're actually going to work on it. So you guys are going to be texturing this model, so unwrapping and texturing rather. Let's do 24 hours after the start of class next week. So we're in week 2 right now, week 3, and this is 10%. Up at the top, or that image of the 3 A-Wings, those are student pieces from previous years. So this is what you're shooting for. So I've given you a low poly model of the A-Wing fighter, very much modeled in a similar method to what we did in modeling this week. So I mentioned that you were going to be unwrapping something similar to what we were modeling. Yeah. Your task is to UV unwrap the model, which I'll do a large portion of it with you, and then create a diffuse map or a color map. So you're just assigning colors for the model, which will include the following elements. So on the tail fins, and I have each of these broken down further in the PDF. So on the tail fins, put in a logo of your choice. At least the bi-color scheme to the A-Wing, so red on the main body of the engines minus this white trim, red on the canopy's back, red on the center of the model, or the center of the craft. The struts on the canopy Don't worry about trying to make it transparent. We'll get to that sort of thing later on. Just add in some details that make it look like glass. Think hard, sharp specular highlights, a little bit of a gradient to it. Your name directly underneath the canopy. So if you guys have seen like real world fighter craft, typically they have the name of the pilot and co-pilot written beneath the canopy. Do the same for yours. And then I made mention of this when we were modeling it. There are certain features on it that you wouldn't necessarily want to model just because they're never going to be close enough to camera to tell that that's actual geometry. In this case, it's the raised rings and glow of the engines. So those rings going around the size of the cylinders, these guys. And you can barely see them on the reference image, but those little raised areas or rings going around the engines, do those in your texture, as well as some implied amount of greebling. So the little seams between the panels of the craft. Mainly what I'm looking for, or what I'm assessing you on, is number one, can you unwrap it? Because again, if you can't unwrap, doesn't matter how good your texture is. Get it unwrapped, and then I want to see how well you guys do translating what you see in 2D space to where it actually exists in 3D. So as you're doing this, you're going to be building the connection between 2D position coordinates versus 3D position coordinates. So just making sure I hit all this. Logo or emblem of your choice. Your name stenciled underneath the pilot hatch. At least a two-tone base coloring of the reference. Raised rings and glow of the engines with some indication of the greeble details. And a simplified cockpit, so support struts into glass. Primary emphasis of the assignment is unwrapping of the ship. It is not recommended that you add or alter the mesh, so don't add in or remove geometry. However, you may choose to do so as long as it does not markedly deviate from the original reference images below. So even if you decide, oh, you know, I'm going to actually add in those raised ring areas, you still need to dress them inside of your texture and unwrap it correctly. So ideally, don't add anything to it. You'll notice that there's no recess for the A-Wings weapons. You do not need to modify the model or attempt to include them. Any changes you do choose to make to the mesh will not be graded, although any negative impact on your unwrap will be. So if you do end up adding some more structural detail to it, and that throws off your unwrap, I won't grade the alteration to the map, but I will grade against the distorted or the added distortion in your unwrap. So I'll be looking at your UV shell placement and scale. So no offset overlapping shells. So if you are stacking shells atop one another, make sure that they're perfect. I'll show you how. Note all these scaled shells. So keeping your checker pattern consistently sized across the entire ship. So you don't want the shell of, so using what I've just done as an example. If this was our ship, you wouldn't want those rims, which I absolutely destroyed, to be larger than the main body of the barrel itself. You can tell immediately that there's a big resolution difference between the size of the barrel and the barrel rings, or rims rather. So don't do it. Keep it like this. Minimize your UV distortion. Make sure that you have all the elements for the color, for the diffuse map or the color map. 3 words that you'll see that, not always, but 3 words that are incorrectly used to describe the same thing: diffuse, color, albedo. typically people use them interchangeably to refer to the color of an object. So it's just the color map or the diffuse, or I'm trying not to use the same words that I'm defining. It's the color image that you're using on the texture, or on the object rather. So I'll get to what the differences are later on. So you're just making one texture, one image for me as a PNG, please. So you will be giving me your PNG image, which is going to be named, in my case, Tomek_Sasha_diffuse. You'll be giving me the 3DCO max file with the unwrap completed that corresponds to that texture, named last first model. So Tomek_Sasha_model.max. Put those in a folder, put the folder in a zip, all named last first homework 1. And you can add in a text string in there if you'd like. Just make sure that it's the file name prefix is your last name followed by your first name. So enough about theory, more practice. Let's see if I can crash max again. There we go. And I currently have my animation bar off, so give me a second to turn it back on. Time slider. Dock. Oh, it's just because it's looking for the checker pattern in the 2021 directory, not the 2020 directory. So just exit out. Like when you get the notification window, just close out. Even though I saved it in 2018 compatibility, so even if you guys were 2 years before, or had max versions 2 years before what you actually are working with, you would have still been able to open the file. So when you get it, I've already added an unwrap UVW to it, even though the modifier is not going to give you much help, because that's a pre-destroyed unwrap. The reason why it's staying wireframe is normally I show you guys how to do an animated opacity texture. So if you make sure that you're in default shading, and then you increase your time slider to 100 frames, it'll go from fully transparent to fully opaque. Frame 50 is 50%, etc. I find that a lot of people just default to the X-ray mode anyway, so I don't do this with you anymore. If you wanted to set it up yourself, if you wanted to experiment with it, it's just going into the material editor. Yep. So it means that if you try to adjust something inside of Editable Poly, so if you add a new edge, do an extrude, weld vertices, it's probably going to destroy your UV unwrap, which right now it's already destroyed. So what are you looking to do in the Editable Poly? Oh, just hit end on your keyboard to make it fully opaque. End, sorry, END, to go to the end of your timeline. It's still just wireframe. Hit F3. No worries. Or you can just bypass it entirely by opening the material editor and slapping a new material on it. Any of them. So, just as a complete aside, if you for some reason wanted to set up an animated texture on the 3DCO Max file, it doesn't have a good translation to any other program aside from Max, so again, I wouldn't worry about it. But anytime you see a numerical value, it means that it can be adjusted or keyed. So for example, we can set this to red, advance to 100. I've actually never done it with the diffuse channel, to be honest. Go to frame 100, make it blue. And have it alternate. So it's the same idea. Just turning on auto key. Let's put it this way. Someone asked if they could do a Hello Kitty A-Wing, and I said yes. So, yep. Yep, feel free to use any color scheme you want. Just as far as the positioning is concerned, use the same key line, or sorry, the key points of reference. So where that stripe actually is, where the colors transition from one to the other, but what the color choice is up to you. And if you want to go further than this for some reason, go for it. So you'll see this one, one of the examples has like some grime and dirt thrown on it, and there's a sort of two-tone gradient across the entire ship. This one's the weaker of the three, but still pretty good. The canopy is nice. This one went not overboard, but definitely nailed the entire effect for the greeble panels. So you can actually see little bolts all over the place holding the panels in place, which was awesome. And this one went even further and added in scorch marks and blaster marks and everything. Sweet. Is it in the main body? Yep, there it is. Nice. Thanks. Oh, man. Yep. Yep. These? No, these are renders from Max. Yep. No worries. I just gotta let you know that someone else exists in the world. Oh, there's other people out there. Ah! Yep. Yes. Hoi! It's, "Hi, I'm Temmie. Hi, I'm Temmie." Anyway. Yep. Yep. Temmie, I heard you. Alright. So, first things first, whenever I'm unwrapping something, especially in this case when there's multiple pieces to it, so this is still very much the same process that we used for the A-Wing and modeling. The only difference is that we've got some geometry in here that's going to help us. So geometry that I added in. And it's actually a little bit more complete with the central vents and the engine rings. But everything else is pretty much the same that we modeled. First things first, I always go polygon mode. And this is my personal preference because I find it gives me a really solid starting point. Poly mode, Control A to select all, and I immediately hit it with a planar projection. The reason is I basically want to get a good starting point and get all of the shattered meshes back into one piece. Polygon mode, Control A to select all, so make sure that the entire model is lining up red, and then planar projection, or planar map rather. To toggle it on and off, it's F2. If you still have the animated opacity on, just press End, E-N-D, on your keyboard to go to the end of your timeline. Once you have the planar projection on, most of the time when you're working with projections, the first thing you should do after adding it is go fit and center. So you'll notice that when I originally hit the planar projection, it turned white and then I couldn't see anything inside of my UV editor. It's because both. The reason I couldn't see anything or the texture wasn't showing up is because the shell is just huge. So fit center. There's the start of our squares. Planar projection. Fit center. It's so first and it was really small. Yep. Fit center. It's these two. Planar projection. Then fit, then center. It's the drop-down menu up here. Yep. How do you not select? You have to turn off planar projection, but don't do that yet. Control A. So before you apply the planar projection, make sure that everything's selected. Sorry, someone was asking something about seams. Oh, sorry, it's pointing. Don't do photo placement. Sorry, don't do photo manipulation. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Don't worry about recreating any of those examples because those are previous students' work, but if you go to the original model that we were working on, why am I not going back to the root? Give me 1 second. So when we were actually modeling out the A-wing, I gave you these two images too. Yep. No. So someone was asking about shrink selection. Cat. Fit center. Fit then center. And then these guys. And then Carl asks, when I clicked on planar map, only the edges show up red. Will that cause a problem later on? It just means that you're in, or you've turned off highlight red. That's F2. So don't unselect it yet, because after you add on the planar projection, you don't really have squares, you have stretched rectangles. With the gizmo still active, go over to the x-axis and just scale it out to get your squares back. Nope. As long as you have the rectangle or squares on top, which you should by default, based on how I set this up. The 3D viewport. Yeah, because right now with the projection active, the only thing that you can adjust is the projection gizmo. So as I scale, it's that yellow box that's growing and shrinking. Sorry, two people talked there. You don't have the squares visible. It's the drop down menu, and just click on checker pattern parentheses checker. It'll still work because it's an override. Oh, okay. But it's the model is showing up opaque, correct? Oh, Do you have the UV editor open while you're doing this? Can you see the actual A-wing? So why aren't you seeing? Yeah, sure. Then the UVs. Yep. All you're looking for is squares. Nope. Nope, you're good. To get the checker pattern back, sometimes Max freaks out and needs you to switch to the checker pattern, sorry, texture checker parentheses UV checker, and then switch back. Max is temperamental. Not as temperamental as Windows 10 though, so. Fire. And you have the UV checker displaying squares currently. Okay. So I'll just Yep. Correct. Yep, I did that too. No worries. So once you've scaled out the planar projection in order to give yourself a better starting point, so we have some squares being visible, now you can get out of planar projection mode, because that's all the planar projection can do for you. Sorry, how do you get out of it? Yep. Just by clicking it again. Yep, -2. Yep. This yellow thing, it's just a reference. You can ignore it. As you start selecting other faces or other polygons, it'll just keep redrawing that quick plane. So make sure that the planar projection is still on, and just scale up out. Sorry, scale out on X, or you can scale in on Y. It does the same thing. You're just scaling it on a single axis to get your squares. Yep. So once you get out of planar projection, one of the other big pluses that I use that initial flat planar projection for is that when if shells were initially separated, so you notice that the body of the craft was originally 26 pieces, Now I can double click it in the UV editor. I just scaled it. It doesn't matter for now. It doesn't matter if your ship's small or large. As long as you have the squares on the top of the ship, that's what you're looking for. So by double clicking shells, it's the entire mesh. So you can basically start pulling it apart. The engine's one piece, tail fins are one piece. Yep. Toggle on your F2 red selected wire, or sorry, your red selection if you haven't already, and make sure that you are scaling the entire ship, not just one piece. The entire ship, and you've got 2 overlays. Yep. Yep. No worries. Nope. The bigger your shell, the higher your count's going to be. Got it. So you do only have the top half of the ship selected. Rotate your camera underneath the ship, because I'm pretty sure what happened was you had ignored back facing turned on, and then you marqueed everything, and then ran the planar projection. So it looks like the whole ship is selected from a top down, but then when you rotate, the bottom is still white. Then just rerun the planar projection, because you've definitely rescaled just the top facing polygons. Completely arbitrarily. So I just went. Nope, this is polygons. I'm just double clicking them. So when you're trying to move the bottom or the center engine folds, these guys, just double click them in poly mode, so that you're not accidentally leaving edges behind. These guys that I have selected right now, it's because they're so small that your mouse won't be able to actually sit on top of them. Yep. Whoa, 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 whoa. Too many talking. Sorry, Alyssa, go. So I actually haven't used anything that would be affected by backfacing. All of my selections have either been done via Control A to select everything, or when I started pulling the ship apart, it's just double clicking. Yep, so don't marquee it, just double click it. So if it won't let you select anything else, it means that you're probably still in planar projection mode. You're either still in planar projection, or you accidentally hit this padlock icon. So make sure this is cleared, so completely gray, and make sure that planar projection is no longer highlighted blue. And when you click an empty space, you're still seeing red. In your modifier stack, is there an icon next to edible poly? That's it. Okay, so freeze what you have right now. Like, don't touch anything. So I mentioned last week, and it bears repeating, so don't feel bad with bringing up this issue. And I'm going to quickly save before I do this. So the reason why Max gives you that error when you try going back into edible poly is if I start adjusting things, and by adjusting I mean like welding two vertices together, or taking out an edge, and then I go back into Unwrap UVW, if you've changed the mesh, or change the number of vertices more accurately, it actually resets your unwrap entirely. So because I went into edible poly and made adjustments, it's reset the unwrap. All my work is lost. Anytime you guys find yourself in a situation where you've modeled something or you've worked on something, got in a model, whatever, and you've got some polygons selected, sorry, if you're working on a model, you go to start unwrapping it, and you find that you can't select certain objects, or certain objects aren't appearing inside the unwrap, double check your modifier list. If you have a sub-object active inside of edible poly, and you can tell by seeing this little icon here, so I was in poly mode when I went back into Unwrap UVW, this means that currently Max is looking at just those selected polys and nothing else. So if I had gone, if I had just the canopy or just these polygons selected and went into Unwrap UVW, those would be the only polygons that I can adjust, because everything else is locked out. If this happens to you, and you've already done some work in the unwrap, first things first, save. And after you save, right click, collapse stack, and re-add the Unwrap UVW without turning a sub-object mode on. That way all of the changes that you made to the unwrap become permanent, and you can now adjust the rest of the model. So Nikolai, that was the source of your issue. So right click on Unwrap UVW, collapse all, and then re-add the unwrap to save all of your effects. And now it will function normally. But you have an icon next to editable poly, correct? So that collapse is going to clear the icon next to editable poly. Then you add the unwrap back on. Yep. And Carla's asking, how do you scale the ship down in UV Edit? Sometimes Max is a little slow to rather detect that you're trying to scale, or that you're trying to switch between 3D view and 2D view. So 3D viewport versus a 2D UV editor window. Typically what I do is just middle mouse button and scrub a little bit. So middle mouse button, just give it a little jitter to let Max know that you're working here now, and then you can scale. So for example, if I tried to switch to the move tool right now, I'm hitting W, but because I'm in the 3D viewport, or the 3D viewport is active, nothing's happening. And you'll notice in my editor, I'm still in scale. I have to shake a little bit inside of UV Editor. Now I can switch to move and move my shells. Exactly right. Yep. So that's one of the reasons why once we ran the planar projection, I moved all of the stuff out of 1.1. So one sec, I'll just the reason why I moved everything out is so that anything left over is more easily seen. And since everything's been moved away from it, you just marquee it. For sure. So, sorry, I'm just resetting mine. So planar projection got set off. Then it's just double clicking the mesh. So the reason why I say don't marquee select them is because everything is overlapped currently. So if I try marquee selecting the main body of the ship, I'm probably going to clip one of the engines and try to move that at the same time. So, yep. And one continuous piece to boot. As a result of the planar projection. Sorry. Yep. So that all that's left is anything that was completely flat, or like Garrett was saying. That's currently all that I have selected, or all that's left inside of 1.1. Makes it easier to select these things. This time I shrunk it with the planar projection. So when I got my squares back, I just used a different size plane. So it's kind of hard to see what exactly is selected, although from the sounds of it, Garrett was rotating around and noticed exactly what was being selected or what corresponded to these green lines. With a model, quote unquote, this complex, it can be hard to tell what the surface actually is. So just like isolation in 3D, inside the UV editor, down at the bottom, there's an eye icon. I'm going to make sure that this isn't underneath my camera. Nope. There's an eye icon on top of a white triangle. Click it. And that will isolate or hide everything else. So if you have a specific area that you want to be working on, which it's always easier to take bite-sized pieces and work on this piece, get it done, take another piece, work on it, get it done. So if we were to be on the main body of the ship, which we will shortly, rather than seeing the main body with all this other stuff in front of it, isolate. And then when you're done, isolate off. So with those back pieces isolated, we're pretty much at the exact same situation that we were at with the top and bottom of the barrel. We can tell it's a 2D shape, but it's a straight line in the UV editor. So we just select them. Planar projection. Find the axis that works. So not Z, not X, but Y axis. And get our squares. I'm going after just these 4 pieces. So the 2 circles, you can't. Yep. So once they're isolated, I could do it with the with everything that's visible right now. So planar projection, y-axis. So a-axis, that will give you something that looks like squares. Switch to the scale tool and scale. Yep, with this icon. Here, I'll just put oops. On the axis of Y. Yep. So switch to the scale tool with R. Sorry, repeat that. Oh, middle mouse inside of 3D. Because what's probably happening is that it thinks that you're still in 3D, or in 2D space rather. So I'm hitting R right now, and it's only letting me move. I have to middle mouse to let Max know that currently I want to be working in 3D. And now when I hit R, it swaps. The middle mouse key, just hold it. Yeah, scroll wheel. And give it a little nudge. And your projection modifier is still on, planar projection. Why would you be locked out? Yep. So in other words, you are active in the viewport, but it's not letting you switch between the two tools. And the tools are, yeah, can you click on it? Like, is it actually active? Oh. Wait, that won't do it either. Never mind. Yeah, I'm not sure why your hotkey's not working. Because there is a toggle override up here, which is on by default, but even then you're still able to switch between the tools. Once you have this done, so I've got squares here, 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 here. On the main portion, I do have squares over most of it, but then I've got some smears on the sides. You're a step ahead of me. So Claude, we will be doing that. You are correct. But for now, these guys, they've got squares. They're quote-unquote done. So I'm just going to move them away from this mess. So I'm going to show you how this gets fixed. But I'm also going to show you the fast way of doing it. So pause for a second. Don't follow. You can. All right. So just watch for this, what I'm about to do right now, and I'll tell you when to follow along again. So the reason why we're getting smears on the sides of the engine here is because if we look in 2D view, there's still a completely straight line. In order to get them no longer overlapped or no longer completely flat, I grab the polygons on the side that are in good shape. Correct. No worries. Okay, and now whatever issue is plaguing Nikolai is now hitting me, because now I can't select stuff. Yeah, it's contagious. Ooh. It's 3D in general. There we go. So I'm going to grab the section that's correct, and sorry, who was it that guessed what I'm about to do? Was that Kat or was that Leo? So yeah, I'm moving it out to the side. As I move it, they're no longer overlapped. The further I move it, I've got my squares back. Same thing on the other side. Now these edges are broken, the one straight down the middle. These guys. Grab the entire shell, like grab this shell rather by double clicking it, and just rerun the planar projection. It will remember all of your projection settings, so you won't have to rescale it again. It'll just set it to one shell for you, and then you can move the polys. When I select the whole face, are you just double clicking? In this case, if I'm grabbing multiple faces, I'm marqueing. But if I want to select the entire shell, then yes, it is a double click, Carla. So that's the way that I said for you guys to just watch. The fast way of doing this. Yep. No, if you've got it working, you're fine. You're fine. So what I just did is correct. It's a manual unwrap. I've got good squares all the way around. The tool that I showed you guys on the barrel, I'm now going to use here. So I've set my Z or my planar projection, which it's forgotten the settings because I just had to reset max. What you guys can do instead of doing the manual, although if you have the manual, you're fine. What you can do is, so you've got perfect squares on the back, perfect squares here, and just a mess. So think back to what I was doing with the barrel. These polygons are all good. So I'm going to tell Max, close. I'm going to tell Max, take these vertices on this edge. So I'm going to grab these 3 vertices. I'm going to pin them. And sometimes it takes Max a little bit to put the blue pins on, but as soon as you click it, they are pinned. And then I'm going to select the shell. And I'm going to rotate to the side and peel. With the vertices selected, yep. Yep. Until you have to move 20 vertices. So moving 6, yeah, it's faster to do it by hand. But next thing that we're about to do has 40 vertices on its border. So you could still do it by hand. There's nothing wrong with doing it by hand. It just takes a little longer. So grabbing the polygons in the area that is correct, that you know this is the way it should look. I've got perfect squares. If you're starting from vertices, you just immediately pin and peel. In this case, I'm just grabbing polys, vertice, pin, peel. So if my sides were incredibly messed up, so that's very wrong. It's fast. Peel, bang. No, don't worry, I'm following you here. You're good. So now all these pieces are correct, and as was suspected, once they are completely squared off, like they have their perfect squares, there's no distortion, now we bring them back into 1-1 by scaling them down. So the way I work, and this helps me keep from having stuff that I lose track of or that I don't get to at some point. Right from the start, I move all of my shells, so each of these is a shell, outside of 1-1. The only time they go back into 1-1 is once they're unwrapped. So that means these guys are done, I don't touch them again. And then I'll go after the main body of the ship. Yep, no worries. Yep. At this point, you can't really worry about having, my squares on these portions are really big compared to the squares on the main body, which are really small. You can't worry about that yet because as you unwrap everything else, your square sizes will change. So everything has to be unwrapped before you worry about scaling everything. Cool. Exactly. So going after the body, just like with the model that we did inside of modeling, there is a symmetry line. One edge that we have on this model that we didn't have in modeling, or I didn't ask you to put in, is an edge that splits it in half, top and bottom. So as you guys go through modeling and texturing, there's going to be times where how something is modeled will make it harder to texture or easier to texture. And there are certain things that you're going to want to do in your texture that have to be adjusted for inside of the model. So by the time that you guys get to term 4, modeling and texturing become one class because they become very interreliant on one another. Not yet, though. So because we double click it. That's already there. We're just selecting it. So select that middle line and break it. Yep. Break it and then move the shells apart from one another. For the break, yes. Purple means that it's been broken. After it's been broken, you just whoops. Undo. It's select the middle edge. Did it turn from what color does it change color from? Red to purple? Okay, just as a final test, switch over to poly mode, double click in the middle of the ship body, and move what you select to the side. You end up with a top and a bottom. So double or reselect that center edge and hit break again. Yep, double click it. And Which Kundes is asking, will we have a small break soon? I'm actually running really short at this point, or really behind rather. So I'm going to be going straight through. And actually at the half-hour mark, I'm probably going to just have you guys pause and watch me complete it. Plus side to Twitch, you can always go back and rewatch. No worries. Did you guys have a... And so just because you said that, and I'm not coming down on you by any means, I'm just saying this to reiterate, one of the worst things, or one of the worst ways that you can treat those VODs, those videos on demand, is, you know, oh, I can always go back and watch it. Yes, it's true that if you miss something or if you need something reiterated, you can go back to it. One of the worst things that you guys can do to yourselves is to become over-reliant on them. Because as you guys go through the program, what we do in Texture 1 and Model 1 is going to be expected to be intuitive by the time you get to Model 2 and Texture 2. Sort of like how you guys are going to start right now with an assignment that has you submitting a diffuse texture. By the time you end this class, it's going to be assumed that a diffuse texture can be easily done or easily achieved, but you're going to have to build 4 other textures off of it. So while it's nice to have the video or the VODs on Twitch to go back and refresh or reinforce, don't let them sort of dull you on keeping your skills becoming intuitive or automated. The same idea as how with iterative saves, I want you guys to eventually be hitting Control S without realizing it, so that you're saving every 5-10 minutes to back up your work. Same thing with the material and the operations that we're going to be doing. I want to get to the point where you just intuitively know it based on having done it previously, rather than saying, when I need to do this, I go back and watch the video. Just as an aside. So I've now got my top and bottom. Just like with the crate and barrel, anytime you see a hard 90 or a big change in volume, so think of the canopy right now as the insets from the size of the crate. This can be chopped off as its own shell. So that edge that separates the transition between canopy and main body, double click it. Go to the back of the craft and just continue that edge all the way down. So add this edge to your selection. You could do either. This one's going to be a little easier to work with though. So if we've got the 90-degree break or over 90-degree break between the canopy and the main body, we've got another 90-degree break going over the back of the canopy. So select those edges, break them, and then pull off the pieces. So now I've got top minus the canopy, bottom, canopy top, and back of the canopy. So Hopefully the situation or the shape of the back of the canopy is looking familiar. Same thing as these guys. Or how those originally looked. Same solution. Grab it, planar projection, get your squares. And you're set. With the canopy itself, it's a little harder. Anytime you have a curvature to an object, so think about the size of the barrel, there was still some distortion in there. If I dial up my tiling, you got it. Yep. Nope. Nope. If you want, you can either just go through with the edges and cut it, or if you select the polygons, planar projection, that'll break it off too. You're good. No, it's a good question. Until all of the shelves have been unwrapped, don't worry about your comparative scaling. Like, if I had this shell really big, so obviously my squares are incredibly tiny compared to everything else. Until everything's unwrapped, and I start trying to get everything to fit inside of 1 UV space, any kind of scaling issues right now are going to change regardless. So as long as you can see them and you can select them easily, you don't need to do any other kind of scaling to them. So with the canopy, it's actually the same idea as the back of the ship. These polygons have nice perfect squares on them. We're going to tell Max to convert selection to vertice, pin, and then select the whole shell. And I'm going to just zoom out so you can see what it ends up doing. Peel. So before and after. Nope. Well, you already did. When we ran that first planar projection to get everything into one piece, that's part of the another reason why I use the planar projection to start. Do you still have the planar projection on? You have to. You can't manually move it in the UV editor with the projection gizmo on. You have to turn off planar projection before you do that. So if this is still on, I can't move it, even though I'm in the move tool. Oops. Yep. So you're just looking for perfect squares. So, and it's fine if you choose polygons other or different from what I do, as long as the area that you're selecting has nice squares on it. So like these guys are nice. These are nice. These are not bad. So you select them, convert to vertice, pin, hold down Control and click vertice. And then go to poly, back to poly, select the shell, and peel it. The size of your squares it's completely arbitrary. It's only a visual reference for you. Yep. You got it. Yep. Or you could even do 2. So peel will only work if you have at least 2 vertices pinned. You don't need more than 2. So this, it's actually a it's actually a gizmo. Yeah. It's just showing the center of my current selection. No worries. So use that same theory, the same process with the top of the ship, because as a result of that planar projection, we've got nice squares going across the top. I'm selecting where I have nice squares on the top of the ship. Exactly. Convert, pin, peel. Awesome question. Sorry, give me 1 second, Garrett. I just want to answer that question. So, really, you're fine. Don't worry about it. It's Friday, dude. No judges. Props for that. So, really good question. Can you only pin some of the vertices? Or do you have to select all the perfects? So, it depends on how complex the object is. So, really good question. Unfortunately, and you'll see this with modeling as well, sometimes it comes down to effectively throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. So if I were to go after these guys only and pin, that's not great to work with. And that's not great to work with. So you end up with the same situation that we had, or that I showed you rather, with the barrel when I let Quick Peel do its own thing. So I've got all the skewing and stretching at the front. So that's why I do it with you. So really good question. Sorry, and Garrett, you had a follow-up, brother? it's showing blue pinned vertices. Like, sorry, let me try that again. Okay, so that is the visual indicator of what vertices are pinned, which I'm sure you already have noticed by now. If you are running pin without polygon selected, so if I just hit peel if you run quick peel without something selected, it'll quick peel everything. So if I was trying to peel just this, shell. Yep, the entire shell, double hit it. Or sorry, double click it to select the entire thing and then peel. Grab your verts. Okay. So I did mention that I would stall out or have you guys just watch along at the 30-minute mark. That being said, I do cover the exact same process, well, mostly the exact same process. There's always going to be a little bit of variation between the classes, but I'm going to go through all the material up to where I ended with section 2 rather. As I go, so just watch at this point, and as you have questions with what I'm doing, by all means ask them in Discord or in the Twitch text chat. But I just want to make sure that I'm able to show you guys live what you need to do in order to get the rest of this done. So don't worry about following along. Save what you're, save the current state that you're at, and I'm gonna go through. I'm gonna get it up to where I was with section 2. So the bottom of the ship is approached the same way as the top. So I've got all these, because I don't want to select all of it. Good question. No, you're right. Good question. So select. Got all my pretty square polygons selected. So gross. Actually, I could probably deselect this guy too. Gross. Pin them. When I go to peel it, it looks kind of right. I've got more of an issue here. But just like with the crate, if the UV shell is inside out, it's going to try and flip itself. Because it's pinned, it can't. So that means that this shell is not trimmed in green when it should be. It means it's inside out. Double hit, mirror, peel. It's good. With the large piece of the engine, again, it's a lot easier to work with isolate turned on, so you're not having to look through a whole bunch of stuff. Basically what's happening right now is if I were to look at this in a cross section, oops. I've got a polygon that looks like, or sorry, a series of polygons that look like this. And then that's been lathed all the way around. In order to get this to be properly unwrapped and have green border edges, because right now my green borders are here and here. So there's my green border edge right there. Right there. So it's not properly trimmed in green as it should be. What I'm going to need to do is, I'm just going to, this is still one continuous edge, but I need to set it up so that it goes from green border all the way out. Then it's that yellow edge. And then it's the blue edge. So I have to unfold or unroll the mesh. I'll show you what that looks like. So it looks like a cylinder. It is a cylinder. Cylindrical projection, fit center. Find the axis that works. Axis of Y. There's that little flyaway piece. Give it a little nudge. I'm going to take down my tiling so it doesn't look so painful to look at. So right now, the sides, come here. The sides look correct. The interior looks correct. But I've got that green edge right in the middle. And these guys are completely flat. So I'm going to select all of the interior pieces. And I'm going to start pulling them out. There's my squares. So shift it a little bit. Grab that green interior, that green interior edge, pull it past. There's my squares. And then I'm just moving those interior polygons until I've got squares on the end. So just a little bit of a shift. There. Now bordered in green. Because I ran the cylindrical projection, it did end up breaking edges. So I'll just click one. Since I want to move its blue sister to what I have selected, I click on Stitch to Source. Stitch this last one. Done. For the little nozzle, it's going to be the exact same thing. The only difference is that whereas this already has a green border edge going all the way around it, this one doesn't. So you have to break either this edge or this edge. So break. Sorry, I'm just going to scale it up on the UV gizmo first. Exactly. So, break. And then I'm going to start pulling things apart. So, pull. Actually, I'm going to go down first. So down. There's my squares. Now I'll select these guys, or add these guys to my selection. I can either do it by hand, or I can hit Grow. Pull. So it'll go from having my sides look perfect to god awful. And it's going to switch around. So literally, it's like pulling a sock inside out. Grow. There's my last set of polys. There it is. Stitch all these guys back together. That one's done too. I actually did a little bit more on that than I did with section 2. Sorry, yeah, section 2. The tail fins are literally the same approach that you use for the ship, the body of the ship. It's just they're not straight on X and Y axes. They're slightly rotated. Otherwise, completely the same thing. Play your map, So like this portion, like, sorry, is it true for the tail fin? How I'm selecting the entire thing, but you're only getting one object or one piece of it. Make sure that you're in poly mode, and then I'm just double clicking it without planar projection, preferably. Yep. So planar, fit center, find the axis that works. The only sort of curveball here is that it is rotated. So while that planar projection is still active, just give it a little bit of a nudge to give you a better result. Scale it to get your squares. And then it's the exact same thing as the ship's body. Oops, sorry, I keep closing the UV editor. Find where you've got nice squares. Do it on both sides. Where the wing is the only thing that's visible. He got it. It's the planar projection. Make sure that you run it on X. Yep, you're completely right. I didn't say anything. So, same idea. Find your good squares, convert to vertice, pin. Another feature that this has that our 3D or our previous model didn't: bisecting edge. An edge that splits the tail fin in half, left versus right. Select it, split it. Sorry, break it rather. And then run your peel. Just like with the ship, or sorry, the main body of the ship, one side is inside out. Mirror it, peel it. Perfect. So basically what's happening when you're running that planar projection, if after running the peel, or the quick peel rather, here, I'll undo this. If after running quick peel, the green border edges are trying to move inwards, it's flipped, because the border edges are trying to switch places with one another, and because you have vertices pinned, they can't. So if it's not trimmed in green, it's flipped. Flip it. Peel it, green light. So what's causing, or the later on when we do normal maps in week, I think I have it scheduled for week 9. Basically what's happening is, wow. My apologies again for my horrific line quality. That yellow line that I just drew is the planar projection. It's shooting out rays, and then based on what it sees, it draws your UV shells in 2D space. If it hits the back side of a polygon, so on this tail fin, this side is actually facing the projection gizmo. This side is actually facing away. So this side is having its negative normals or its innards, its flipped polygons being drawn into 2D space. When you try and quick peel something, it's trying to make it right side around. So hence what you have to do with mirror and peel. We'll get more into that theory later on. That's one wing. Yep. Broke it in half. So you may be thinking, okay, you know, that's makes sense, and it sounds like it's making sense to a lot of you. And again, I'll be on Discord afterwards if you, people want me to run through areas with you one-on-one. Yep, you're free to leave me messages. It's just that my listed office hours are the only times I'm guaranteed to be on Discord. And you can always send me an FOL email saying, are you available for this time on Tuesday or Monday? And it's just that Discord usually gives you a faster turnaround, especially on the weekend. Just because we're not actually required to be on Discord over the weekend. So if I'm on Discord for social purposes, I might see your message at that point. So from the sounds of it, it's starting to click with you guys quite a bit. And the little back and forth that you guys have been having in the chat, that's perfect. As much as your instructors put in a lot of work, and I'm not talking about myself here, not discounting myself either, but I'm talking about your other instructors, not myself. As much as we put in work for our lesson plans and our demonstrations and all that, realistically, your number one source of information in general is going to be us. A very close second is going to be Google. Your best source of information as it applies to what you guys are expected to do, so the process of unwrapping, the process of modeling, the process of drawing, the process of whether or not the model looks good, apart from your instructors, your best resource is going to be each other. So, you know, popping into Discord channels or your private or your student Discord server, you know, sharing pictures of what you guys are working on, asking questions of one another. By far and away, we find that student sections or student years that communicate with one another, the more you communicate, the better you all do. So there's really no benefit to being like, you know, oh, I have 3D experience coming into this, and I know all these tips and tricks that, you know, will make that will make my project look better than my classmates. That's only going to serve you in the short run, because sooner or later, someone else is going to find a technique or a process that works well, or, you know, they come out as being a really good texturing artist because as they get into different processes, it starts to click for them. You don't want to be hoarding secrets. It's probably one of the worst things that you can do, short of trash talking other people. So, yeah, this entire back and forth that you guys have had in the Discord, absolutely perfect. Sorry, just wanted to point that out because I actually made mention to section 2 yesterday that you guys are far more vocal, and I said that's not a complaint. Like, I'll tell you guys, you know, you have to be quiet so I can get through the lesson, but realistically, your chance, no, it's nothing to apologize for. Like I said, I have no problem telling you guys to be quiet for a bit. And you guys have never fought me on that. So, yeah, it's not something to apologize for. But because you guys talk so much, and I'm not saying mouth is moving. I'm saying you're asking questions, you're helping each other out. That has a really good potential for you guys to continuously develop your skills. So keep it up. Anyway, and after I said that, those guys started talking more too. So not only are you helping your class, but you're helping other sections too. Anyway, so hopefully that is all starting to make sense to you. When you guys watch this back, again, you may pick up things that you hadn't the first time around, whatever. That being said, remember one of the first questions that we answer with modeling, is it symmetrical? In this case, yes it is. Wouldn't it be nice to only do the unwrap for half of this? So I've already got the main engine, the engine nozzle, and the tail fins. Let's do that. So I'm going to collapse my stack. So anytime you collapse stack, all of your changes become permanent. Your UV adjustments become saved into the 3D Studio Max file for that model. The one that I just unwrapped is this one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the other. So when I mentioned in the write-up, you're allowed to adjust the mesh. Just don't. Bingo. Sorry, I'll repeat that for Twitch. Garrett just asked, so the mesh is duplicated onto the object, and that's exactly it. So I'll select the objects that I have unwrapped, and they haven't been unwrapped on the other side. I'll detach them. Doesn't matter what I name them, because this is only going to exist for 5 seconds. Detach. Select it. Symmetry it. And attach it back. Now when I go unwrap UVW, exact same unwrap, exact same perfect, pixel perfect overlap. It's beautiful. So it looks like only one shell, but if I move it, it's both. Now I would start worrying, well, minus this piece, which I'm going to leave you guys. Now I would start moving everything into 1-1, and now I'm worrying about the size of my checker pattern. But at this point, the hard part's done. Now to get this all into Photoshop, I'm just going to quickly run through that process again. So I'm going to get these be relatively correctly scaled. I've done this so often that I'm fairly good at doing it blind. Watch, I say that, and now I'm going to screw it up. Yeah, exactly, right? I had a Windows 10 update today. My day can't get worse. The worst thing is I have all of my... Yeah, but I have them all deferred, and it still ran it. I was actually on... technical support with Microsoft, and I was demanding that they basically give me a free copy of Windows 7. I'm like, give me back the money I paid to upgrade to Windows 10 and give me a free copy of Windows 7 because this thing is trash. They actually offered it. Yeah. I was like, you know what? This is over the period of like 2 weeks. I was like, you know what? Forget it. And I just gave up on it. And this was immediately after the fall creators update for Windows 10. That was the one that gave me the most problems. And it just hasn't been that bad since. Let's put it this way. My system was blue screening every 12 hours. And I was reinstalling the OS every week. It sucked so hard. So yeah, yeah. So I've packed everything back into 1.1. My tiling should be close. Yeah, it's not bad. Again, these parts aren't completed because these I'm leaving to you. Hint 90, whoops, 90, come here. Hint is 90 degrees. 90 degrees. And these are symmetrical, just not on the x-axis. They're on the y-axis. And I forgot to bring this guy in. So that's been scaled too much. The 1 UV space. You can't make it bigger, but you can make everything smaller. Yeah, everything for now has to fit inside of that box. Make sure that you're leaving space in between the different shells and space between the UV border or 1-1 and your shells so that you don't have texture bleeding across each other. So this guy could probably do with a little bit of a shunt down. When you're good question. Let me do this and then I'll tell you, or I'll tell you a couple different ways that they do it. So once you're ready to go into Photoshop, it's Tools, Render UV Template. Now I don't have a resolution requirement for you guys on this. There's not much point going higher than a 2K, so 2048, 2048. I won't grade you down if you do, but just realize that there's not going to be any kind of benefit to it. So save out the image as a PNG. And then bring it into Photoshop. So it'll give you, if you save it as a PNG with alpha, you'll automatically have the alpha layer in there. So you make a layer below it, flood it, and now you actually have a way to tell where something is on the 3D model, and you can start. I usually just set the UV layer to invert. So Control I, desaturate, Control Shift U, and I usually set it to multiply. None of that is required. As long as you have your UVs in there, you can be like, okay, this is a tail fin, so one second, I'm just going to grab an icon. Image and tab with difficulty. I don't know why my computer is just dying with Photoshop, but it is. Yeah, probably. Hi, I'm Temmie. Hi, I'm Temmie. Say hi to my friend Temmie. Yes. So the only thing you have to make sure of is when you save out the file, hide your UVs. You don't want your wireframes showing on things. Save out. Again, as a PNG. You can give me PNGs, TGAs, or TIFs. Just don't give me JPEGs, please. The compression is too garbage. So that saved out my diffuse. A benefit to TGAs versus PNGs. I can't think of any off the top of my head. They are slightly better with their compression. Like they're slightly smaller file sizes. But because you guys aren't going to be doing anything too crazy like UDIMs or full texture sets for an environment, it won't be an issue. Yep. So if I go now, Control D, or sorry, wrong hotkeys. Control V to duplicate. Bring Temi over here. Save. And overwrite. As soon as you start moving in the viewport, it'll update. Nope. As soon as you drag and drop it once, you're good. Yep. So that's it. I actually caught up in the last half hour to where the other section was. I'm just going to quickly answer Garrett's question about how texturing or how environments are done if right now you guys are working just in 1.1. So I'm going to spend about 5 minutes explaining this, then I'm going to go for a puff, and then I'll be back on Discord voice chat, or on Discord rather. So if you want a one-on-one session with me, send me a direct message, and I have the process listed in texturing if for whatever reason you don't know it. And yeah, otherwise I will see you guys on Tuesday. Mm-hmm. Oops. Yep. Yeah, I can make it visible to you right now, actually. I was going to show it next week as an iterative, but wait, stitching and breaking, I think that's the other one. Yep. I actually want to get my hands on a macro lens for my reef tank. Mm-hmm. If to be fair, you are talking about prices for an SLR lens, right? Like not a hobby camera, a professional camera. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I don't want to step on your conversation, but I want to get this done so that I can answer Garrett's question and then smoke and jump into Discord chat. Okay. I still wouldn't smoke in the house. Well, the smell. Yeah. So one of the options, or one of the ways used, is right now I have this set up to be a blend. So basically what would happen is I would have a bunch of tileable textures. So like wood, stone, dirt, grass. And I'm just going to quickly set these up. Oh, I'm still on Twitch. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I point to it. Yeah, I don't know why my latency like doubles, but so this would be a setup for a blend where purple would be rock, white would be grass, green would be sand, because like this would basically be a seabed. So this is basically what Cyberpunk 2077 uses, or it's a variation of it. Rather than hand texturing every single detail or every single facet or aspect of the character or the environment, they went through, as I understand it, I've only been reading a little bit on this. Like, the process has been used for a while, but for a huge AAA game, it's the first time it's been used this extensively, as far as I know. Yeah. So basically it would be set up where purple is a tileable rock, green is a tileable dirt, white is a tileable grass, and then just by changing the vertex colors, it's assigning that tileable texture to the entire area. So if I want this area to suddenly be stone, I would just change its color, or the color of the vertices rather, to purple, and it would automatically get the tileable rock texture assigned to it. The only problem with doing a gradient transition, exactly. So that's both the biggest advantage and downfall of doing vertice blends or vertice color assignments, is that if the mesh is comparatively low res, it can only transition over a certain distance, and usually the transition's kind of blocky. Like you can actually see the triangulation here. If you add on or add in more geometry, the more geometry you add, the smoother the transition becomes, because there's more points of interpolation between 100% rock and 100% grass. So it smooths or it softens itself out. So there's my mesh, or there's my wireframe right now. So it's really clean, or it's a really smooth transition, but it's a lot of polys comparatively. That's one option. The other option is to actually just use vertice colors to texture, and that's what you guys are going to be using inside of ZBrush. So once you have it this high res, it's week 9. So, and again, I'll have a walkthrough for you. Between the multiple aspects, so going ground floor all the way up, so models, i.e. polys, textures, i.e. pixels, lighting, i.e. ray tracing, and then post effects, i.e. GPU. That's actually the rank for how much they drag down your system. So you can get away with having more polys, you can get away with a higher poly count more easily than you would a higher res texture or a lot of post effects like lens flare, bloom, that sort of thing. Not so much prioritized, but when you think about what a model is, or what the engine is doing when it's rendering the model, all it's really doing is it's taking the vertice positions, so the X, Y, and Z coordinates for the vertices, and then making a representation in 3D space. So it's still kind of point data as opposed to, or it's closer to point data rather than it having to read an image. It's just reading. Now, mind you, I'm not a tech, so I may be oversimplifying this rather. So it's reading stuff like 1, 1, 1, 2, 1. Or ASCII values. So the model is the lighter version of data, whereas with textures, it's, you have 1024 by 1024, and then so you have 1024 entries of texture. That's assuming that it's taking RGB values, it's like 125, 255, 255, and entries for that 1024 times. Now, different programs, or like a PNG has no compression to it. JPEGs have a lot of compression to it. But the footprint of textures is typically larger. Then once you go to lighting, so if I were to pretty much. No, it sounds good. You've got the right track. So one step up from textures would be what you just said, ray tracing. So right now I've got a light that's applying some ray trace shadows to the scene. So what happens with ray tracing is just what it sounds like. That light, so I'll redraw it over here. That light is firing a number of rays, and it's based off of your ray trace properties. Where it hits an object, or where it hits the object, it creates a highlight. Where it hits an object and other rays are occluded, that's why it creates the shadow. The higher density the mesh is, the more expensive ray tracing becomes. The cheaper your ray tracing is, the lower resolution your shadows become. So it's just a gigantic balancing act. And then after all that, once you have a specular highlight, so you can actually see one on this guy right now. Once you have a specular highlight, you start to get stuff like lens flare, bloom, anastrophe, which is like stretched highlights. Yep. Did you know that I was actually currently pulling up Lara Croft? So, not the best resolution, but from about 150 triangles, no continuous arms, no continuous shoulders, single tone skin for the most part, basically line art for her eyes to what Lara Croft is now. Yeah. I wasn't going to mention it, so I'm glad you did. But see, at the same time, compare the amount of time that it takes to produce this model versus this model. That's depending on who the artist is, yeah. To be fair, the Draenei have a tail. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just checking the Twitch chat because I actually still have people in here. So for the content that we just followed along with in the last 30 minutes of the class, should we just watch the recording? Yes. And I actually made a write-up visible to you guys. So it's same. So it's in stitching and breaking inside of week 2. And it basically does a technical, it does a technical breakdown of all the tools that I used and how to use them. Of course. No. Have you seen? Go ahead, Garrett. Yeah. Speaking of menus within menus within menus, have you seen ZBrush's interface? So one second, I'm just going to boot up one of my projects. So, thanks. So, ignore the pretty picture, look at the UI. So, so everything is in a list, or it's in the spotlight. It's mostly words, but icon, yes, for that program, yes. Don't don't worry, I think I've got about a 24 page write-up for ZBrush with pictures and hotkeys. It wouldn't be. It wouldn't be that big because I don't bother reinventing the wheel with any of that. I just specifically talk to what we use, so it wouldn't be that huge. But I gotta go because I just noticed that people are messaging me in Discord, and I'd like to have a cigarette to take the edge off. So I'll. No, it's fun. I like talking about this stuff. So. Yes. Thank you. All right. I'll see you guys in a bit. Or, sorry, if I don't see you in Discord afterwards, I'll see you in class on Tuesday. See you then.